Okay, hello, my friends. As you know, the Kerch Bridge was hit for the second time a little more than a week ago. Today, we see an article by Seymour Hersh talking about how it was U.S. technology, and we're going to talk through that and try to understand whether that was or wasn't, or how credible that claim is. I'm going to show you what they said in RT about this, and then we'll talk about Seymour Hersh, we'll talk about his claims, and I'm going to show you something brilliant, absolutely brilliant, that Jonathan Pierce put together talking about this very thing. So here we go. We're going to start with RT.
The Biden administration's role in both attacks was vital. Of course it was our technology, one American official told me. The drone was remotely guided and half submerged, like a torpedo. I asked if there was any thought before the bridge attack about the possibility of retaliation. What will Putin do? We don't think that far, the official said. Our national strategy is that Zelensky can do whatever he wants to do. There's no adult supervision.
Okay, so that sounds like pretty terrible testimony that an official actually told him that. Who's the official? He's unnamed. We don't know who he is. We don't know what rank he is, how high up in the administration. So can you find somebody somewhere to make some claim? Sure. I was on my school board, but I count as an official. I don't know what the level of credibility is, but let's go on and talk about this in a more significant way. We're going to watch the rest of this RT piece first to kind of set the table for the article and talking about Hersh, and then what Jonathan Pierce did to help us understand what was going on. So let's hear the rest of the RT clip first.
The report also quotes intelligence community members as saying that they feel that the Biden administration is basically under the thumb of Zelensky.
Okay, so this is the same report saying that the Biden administration's under the thumb of Zelensky, which is absolutely fascinating because usually RT will report that Zelensky is being, a puppet being manipulated by his Western masters. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that this kind of language will be kicked around by repeaters, by the Tucker Carlsons of the world saying, well, Zelensky has something on Biden. He's got dirt on the Biden administration, and that's why Biden is doing what he's doing. This is going to be the new narrative shortly, at least for some time. I don't know how much life it'll get or how far it'll get picked up, but it will get some publicity.
He has some leverage over the Biden administration, not simply because of the corruption regarding Biden's son and the natural gas company, but furthermore information that the Zelensky government may have on Biden, forcing him to give them a blank check to do whatever they want. Now, the report goes on to say that at this point, the balance of power in the war is settled, that Ukraine will not be taking back the Donbass oblasts, and furthermore, it will not be taking back Crimea. And
this is a standard Russian talking point that they're going to want to spread as well.
Essentially, the war is being prolonged. More weapons are going to Kiev, but Kiev has no real prospects of doing anything but continuing to push against Russia in the aftermath of their failed offensive. The offensive of Ukraine, the counteroffensive that was widely hailed in American media, completely, utterly failed.
Again, another talking point that the counteroffensive has failed. The counteroffensive is still going.
And at this point, Ukraine has no future prospects or no realistic scenarios for winning or settling the conflict with Russia in a way that is too...
I know. So the next talking point will be that if you're giving more weapons, you're just prolonging the war that they can't win, right?
To their advantage. Now, the report goes on to speculate and highlight some information and analysis of the Wagner Group and their mutiny. The report says that Putin detected that members of the Wagner Group, some of them were potential dissidents, who considered Vladimir Putin to not be a Russian fundamentalist, to not be as much of a Russian fundamentalist as he is, and that they wanted to expand Russia all the way into Europe, and that Putin does not agree with this, and that the coup attempt, the mutiny by the Wagner Group, was a successful entrapment of these forces that could have potentially caused problems.
That's a way of raising Putin's status by saying, see, he detected this and he entrapped them. Not that there was something going on outside of his control
within the Russian military. So that is what Seymour Hersh revealed in his new report. Quotes from intelligence community officials about the harsh conversations that seem to be happening behind closed doors, where there doesn't seem to be a lot of confidence.
Okay, so that's what his report revealed. Where did he publish his report? Well, he published it on his own Substack because nobody else would be crazy enough to actually publish it. But once it gets published, it takes a life on its own, and you get it quoted in other places. Global Village Space is a Pakistani website, and you'll see it in other places as time goes on. Okay, let's go back to Seymour Hersh's Substack. Here, Operation Buffer in Ukraine, and here's that language of the Biden administration role in both attacks was vital. Of course, it was our technology, one official told me. But was it really our technology? And before we talk about this, let's talk about Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh also did this thing about 3 months ago where he said Zelensky stole $400 million, where he talked about another anonymous U.S. official making this claim, but there was no proof. There was just this claim. And so if you understand who Seymour Hersh is, he's a guy that he covered the My Lai massacre, and he's made his name by finding corruption in the U.S. government. And I've described him before as like the economist who predicted 13 of the last 2 recessions. And he just sees the U.S. is wrong everywhere, or U.S. corruption, or whatever. Now, if you predict the last 2 recessions accurately, that's great. But if you predict 13 and there's only 2, maybe something's off. That's kind of how you should understand Hersh. Jonathan Pierce did a remarkable job here, and I'm going to highlight just a couple minutes. I'll put the link to his whole video below, and so you can see it. And I urge you, if you're not subscribed to Jonathan Pierce, please subscribe to ATP Geopolitics. Here is his review, just a quick 3-4 minutes of what he had to say about it. If I could give him an A+, if I could assign the grade, I would. Watch this.
Of course, it was our technology, end quote, one American official told me. So these are the words of an American official. The drone was remotely guided and half submerged like a torpedo, end quote. I asked if there was any thought before the bridge attack about the possibility of retaliation. Quote, what will Putin do? We don't think that far, quote, the official said. Quote, our national strategy is that Zelensky can do whatever he wants to do. There's no adult supervision. Putin responded to the second attack on the bridge by ending an agreement that enabled Ukrainian wheat and other vital food crops stymied by the ongoing war to be shipped from blocked ports on the Black Sea. Quote, brackets, before the war, Ukraine exported more grain than the entire European Union and nearly half of the world's sunflower seeds. And Russia began steadily intensifying missile and rocket attacks in Odessa, whose initial target list has expanded from port areas to inner city sites. The official said there was a lot more than grain and sunflower seeds flowing into Europe from Odessa and other Black Sea ports. Quote, Odessa's exports include illegal stuff like drugs and the oil that Ukraine was getting from Russia. Right. Just a little sidebar here. So Seymour Hersh has admitted that Russia were hitting sites within Odessa and more, port sites and sites within the city limits. And his justification, because, you don't admit that without saying, and therefore that's unfair, it's a bit of a war crime. So he then goes to the justification, but Odessa does export a load of illegal stuff like drugs and oil that Ukraine was getting from Russia, without any attempt to provide evidence for the claim that this supposed American official is saying.
Right.
No attempt to substantiate that claim.
Right. And the assertion without the evidence is the real problem here. And he's going to make another assertion. And the assertion sounded weird. When he reads the next paragraph, it sounded weird to my mind. And I was thinking, that just doesn't sound right. But Jonathan got it, and you'll see what he did, and it was just awesome. Watch this.
Really irresponsible journalism here, if you can call it journalism, to say something like that, and then just leave it hanging. Yeah, there you go. Massive claim there. Just going to leave that there. Not going to say anything about it. He goes on. At this point, with the Ukraine counteroffensive against Russia thwarted, the official said. So again, is it thwarted? Quote, Zelensky has no plan except to hang on. it's as if he's an orphan, a poor waif in his underwear, and we have no real idea of what Zelensky and his crowd are thinking. Ukraine is the most corrupt and dumbest government in the world outside of Nigeria, and Biden's support of Zelensky can only come from Zelensky's knowledge of Biden, and not just because he was taking care of Biden's son. Right. I'm not going to read any more. In fact, there's not much more to say. In fact, there's just that little bit there. There are some in the American intelligence community, the official said, who worry about Putin's response to the recent Ukrainian drone attacks in central Moscow. Will Kiev be next? Okay, will Kiev be next? Right. So, this is supposedly an American intelligence official. And this does not read at all like an American intelligence official. And we're going to come on.
And that's exactly what I was thinking. And so when you spend enough time in things, you start to recognize patterns, and you start to have a certain implicit knowledge where you just, something doesn't sound right. It's like the mechanic that can listen to a car and be like, you know what? I think it's this, not that. It's kind of like that. I've spent enough time in RT, and where I can hear things on the Russian side, and I know what public policy proclamations sound like, and I hear what intelligence figures say, and they don't tend to talk like this guy. Now, maybe he thought he was talking off the record, or maybe there's some other reason, but he got it. Listen to this.
To an absolute humdinger in a second. But this kind of rhetoric, we have no real idea of what Zelensky and his crowd are thinking. Okay, so Zelensky and his crowd is really pejorative. Mm-hmm. Then he says, always concentrate on the little things here, the words, like someone in the intelligence community would not be that, would not say things like that. I'm absolutely positive. He says, Ukraine is the most corrupt and dumbest government in the world outside of Nigeria. That's not something an American would say. Just you just wouldn't call them the dumbest government in the world. If you're in the intelligence community, that is not an assessment. It's just such a subjective, almost valueless statement. It's just so unlike an intelligence operative. Just outside of Nigeria. That's not on the American radar. That necessarily is a kind of comparison. I think
it's kind of like the kid who's trying to get out of school, so they write themselves an excuse note and they say, "I'm Mrs. Smith. Honest, I am, and my son Jack has an illness today, so he can't come to school." Like Mrs. Smith wouldn't say, "Honest, I am," because Mrs. Smith doesn't talk like that. She would just say, "I'm Mrs. Smith. Jack can't come to school today because he has whatever's wrong with him." Right? So something didn't sound right, but he put his finger on it.
And Biden's support of Zelensky can only come from Zelensky's knowledge of Biden, not just because he's taking care of Biden's son. Anyway, so that's really problematic. So my view here is that this isn't an American official here. So if we go back to who this was, an American official told me. What kind of official? Official in what role? I mean, yeah,
it's another good question.
Are you actually an intelligence official? Don't know. Does it say there actually? So you're just. I mean, he goes on to say there are some in the American intelligence community, the official said. So the implication would be he's in the intelligence community. It doesn't really say that. This is really sloppy from Seymour Hersh. And what absolutely puts a nail in the coffin of this article is this brilliant little find. I read this and thought, okay, that's a bit odd. But I don't really know that saying. He said, it's as if he's an orphan, a poor waif in his underwear. I've never heard that, so I just read over that. Whatever. Apparently, that is a Russian term, right? So, OMG, Seymour Hersh's handler really messed up. The anonymous US official supposed to be briefing Hersh used a Russian expression. He gives the Russian Cyrillic translation, the actual expression there.
How about that?
English speakers don't use. I've never heard this in my life. And I've taught writing. Right? I am a writer. A poor waif in his underwear. It's a Russian saying. In other words, Seymour Hersh, this article, just that phrase alone, in my opinion, not only destroys this article, but it destroys Seymour Hersh's, I think, Nord Stream article that was blaming the US and Norway.
Yeah, because the credibility is now shot. So, Jonathan, you did a great job. I found myself when you pulled up that, you found the other line, the poor waif in his underwear or whatever. I found myself clapping, literally clapping, going, that I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but there's something wrong. Now, there's all kinds of possibilities. Perhaps there was a U.S. intelligence official like Ritter, who's a Russophile, who would use that phrase because he's familiar enough with Russia. That's a possibility. Perhaps it was that it was a Russian handler. Perhaps it was somebody who just happened to use that phrase, who is widely read. But that seems unlikely. Perhaps the person just made up the phrase out of nowhere. But in my experience, you don't plagiarize accidentally. Like, that doesn't happen. And so I think Jonathan's probably right. This is probably a little dodgy, to use his kind of phrase. Jonathan, tell me where I send the A+, because you earned it, man. That was really good work trying to find this. I am right there with you. I don't think there was American tech used in this, or if there was, it certainly, this guy's key witness, this anonymous source, is really worthless. All right, so that's what I wanted to share with you about, was American tech used in attacking the Kerch Bridge? It could be, but we don't know. And what Seymour Hersh did here did not help us get any closer to understanding the truth. Jonathan, good work. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the subscribes, the shares, the coffees. Thank you more than anything else for caring enough about Ukraine to listen to this video.